Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Nihilistic Realism podcast. I'm Amelia and my co-host is Niall, and if you're new here, this is a podcast where we discuss philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, society, and that sort of thing in an interview-style format where I ask Niall questions and we go from there, from the perspective of a philosophy we've come to call Nihilistic Realism. As always, be forewarned, there are some human noises ahead. Okay. So we're going to try and start more with the fundamentals on this one. So first question. What is nihilistic realism and why those two terms together?
Okay, well that's a really good place to start. So nihilistic realism is a recent term that I've devised. The philosophy has been in the works for better part of a decade now, but if it's only
over half your life.
Yeah, over half my life. But I've only recently come to that terminology because it best encapsulates the foundational principles of the philosophy / ideology. But of the framework, the definitional framework, which is essentially what it is. It's just an interpretation of various terms and how they connect to each other. And it provides a decent framework from which or through which, I should say, to interpret ideas and events
and claims. Is it kind of like the axioms?
Yeah, it's almost like their foundational axioms, your premises. But yeah, long before it had a name for it, the philosophy was slowly developing, essentially around the foundational principle of what I now refer to as realism, which is the realization that reality exists as reality exists, independent of what is believed about it. So, like, there are things that are true about reality. Like, just outright, like, there are things that are true of reality. There are situations that are the way that they are. There are phenomena that are the way that, but there are phenomena that are the way that they are. There are circumstances and situations that are the way that they are, independent of any manifestation of thought relative to them. Like, I can believe that it's snowing inside right now, but it has absolutely no implication on the reality of the situation of, like, how snow works and the situations in which it can form and, like, what's actually happening in this little pocket of air that we're in right now.
So there are claims that you can make that more accurately reflect what's, like, actually the patterns we actually perceive.
Claims that you can make, beliefs that you can have that either correspond more or less to actual reality. And more importantly than that, just the basic most realization that there is an objective external reality that is what it is, independent of what is believed about it. Like, that realization is very core to my conception of realism, because essentially my conception of realism is Nova.
Hey, Nova.
Hi. My conception of realism is Nova. No, my conception of realism is acknowledging the reality of that situation and then making the honest attempt to comprehend reality as it is, independent of anything you might want to believe about it. So that's, like, foundational to my entire philosophy. And it essentially led me to, like, atheism, because, like, it came down to a... Sorry, go ahead and say what you were going to say.
I was just going to ask, I guess I understood realism to be, like, intellectual honesty and trying it's to about sorting your ideas to closer approximate truth.
That's essentially it, because, like, what is truth if not the things that actually are about reality, the things that are actually consistent and accurate about reality? That's this truth that intellectual honesty is talking about. So it essentially is acknowledging the fact that there are things about reality that are true, and that these things exist as true, independent of whether or not you believe they're true. Like, right. Independent of whether or not I believe it, like, I am a corporeal, like, I require food and water and, like, all these things. Like, so independent of, and that is a fundamental principle relative to the, relevant to the pursuit of understanding and, like, the, just the concept of philosophy in general.
Like, we can never technically prove, quote unquote, that there's an objective reality outside of us because we're inherently stuck in our own subjectivities our entire existences.
Yeah, but our subjectivities emerge. Nova. But our subjectivities emerge within an objective framework, and they couldn't not...
That seems what's most likely, right?
Not only that seems what's most likely, but they could not. you couldn't define a subjectivity without also defining the objective space in which it manifests, in/from which it manifests. So say like you have a subjectivity that is a simulated being on a computer. The objective conditions in which the being manifests is the computer and its conditions. So we have a subjectivity, which is you and I and the people listening. They objectively exist under certain circumstances, even though they are a subjectivity, and that subjectivity experiences a very limited subset of objective phenomena. Like, that is independent of the fact that they exist within a larger objective framework. And in fact, that larger objective framework has consistency across subjectivities. Like, we have intersubjective commonalities based on these objective principles, these objectively existing phenomena.
Okay. So that's realism. Why nihilistic realism?
So nihilism is fundamental to it as well as fundamental as the concept of realism, because nihilism has to do with the objective-subjective distinction in relation to meaning, specifically the reality that meaning in all its forms only exists within the context of the minds that manifest it, and that profess it, and that cling to it, and that create it, essentially. And it's both created and destroyed within the context of minds. Like, I create a word by making a new noise, and then getting it. Well, even without others agreeing that the word means the same thing, it still subjectively has meaning to me. Like, even if flagarble only means something to me and I only understand it, excuse me, Nova, that still gives it meaning, but it becomes intersubjectively meaningful if we all agree that flagarble means egg salad. And then it just starts to being the thing. And like, if we all just start agreeing that egg salad doesn't actually mean egg salad anymore, it's just gibberish, then all of a sudden something that had meaning has lost meaning. And this is essentially like the building blocks of and the basemost components of the meaning phenomena.
So like, there's forms of meaning that past human civilizations had that is now lost to us.
Yeah, like entire ways of organizing their mind relative to the experiences that they had, or entire ways of worshipping, or entire languages and rituals and
combinations of food.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, entire qualia subsets. But it's essentially
tools.
It's a foundational philosophical razor, nihilism, because it allows you to easily slice past things like, what is the meaning of life? Or questions of like, what is my purpose? Or like all of these broken non sequiturs, because it puts it into context as manifested within the context of mind. Like, there is only meaning when you make it exist, and meaning stops existing when you stop making it existing. And stop making it exist, I should say. And when you have a situation where, like, every sentient agent in a pocket of the infinitum is annihilated, all meaning is also annihilated because it's predicated upon their existence. Like, there must first be subjects existing for any form of meaning to exist. And I think that's a very important distinction, and it comes up in a lot of different places across philosophy. It applies in a lot of different places, and it helps you get out of the woods on a lot of different things. So there's more to the philosophy than that, but essentially it's called nihilistic realism because nihilism and realism are profoundly important and foundational to this approach of attempting to honestly navigate reality to figure out what is likely true, independent of the things that we want to be true, which is, in my mind, the biggest philosophical trap of our species and perhaps of all time, just like the core dichotomy of realism, as I refer to it. When confronted with the reality of realism, how do you react to it? Do you react by clinging to the things that you wish were true, or do you react by forfeiting your arrogance and your ego to comprehend what reality actually is, or to just like have a chance at comprehending reality as it actually is, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was reading a book recently, and the philosopher there basically denies that realism can even be a pursuit that humans can undertake. He's like, no, we're all biased. Like, ultimately, our beliefs are just about what we wish were true, is basically what he was saying, and that
I think that's just a self-admittance, and he's trying to project that onto others.
Maybe I guess he thinks it's hubris that we could even try to not that have our beliefs influenced but by what we want to be true.
I think on some level it's definitely something to try to navigate towards, but a feat to undertake, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's impossible. I just think that it's like a challenge that we have to undergo, and that it will of course, on some level, the information we uncover about reality is inherently biased by the fact that we are a subjectivity experiencing it. Like, it's filtering through the machines that we are, through the mechanisms that we are to be comprehended. But that doesn't mean that we will never comprehend, like, objective reality or any truths about reality. It just means that those truths must always be taken into consideration as skewed through this. Like, we are seeing photons appear as photons in the very particular ways that they manifest because of the ways that we manifest, and because of the fact that we're built out of the stuff that we're built out of, and we perceive in the way that we perceive.
That makes sense. I think the philosopher saying that seems a little defeatist and kind of silly.
Well, it's like saying you'll never prove God doesn't exist. It's like, well, it's not really the point.
Yeah, it's a little silly in context of the fact that we are uncovering knowledge about reality.
Perpetually. Daily.
And yeah, you are rare for being someone who really tries to believe...
You just...
not have your beliefs influenced by what you want to be true.
I think it's fundamental. I think it's one of the most important aspects of a person's philosophy, is taking your ego out of it. Like, it has absolutely... Like, it's not... Yeah, it is. That is realism. I not only don't care what you want to be true, like, just generally, but I don't care what I want to be true. So, like, people think when I'm having arguments or discussions, like, that I don't respect their beliefs, or that I don't... It's not about not respecting your beliefs. It's that I don't have any interest in humoring the things that you just want to be true. And, like, on a more fundamental level, I don't humor and care about the things that I want to be true, because that's not the point. It's not about what you want to be true. It's about mutually pursuing comprehension of what most likely is true, independent of you or me.
You're not invested in ideas that you're just like...
Exactly.
Like, you're not
emotionally or egotistically invested in the ideas, in the things.
You're not like, I really want nihilism to be true.
Exactly. None of the beliefs I hold, none of the opinions I hold are held because I want to. It's like incidental. I am incidental to what is true. That's how I phrase it. I forgot that for a while, but I just dug it up right now. But I am incidental to what is true of reality. It's like, okay, I'm just here. What is, but like, I'm just here. And those of honest intellect attempt to comprehend reality as it actually is.
Interesting.
I think that's a good summary of the foundational pillars.
Okay, next question. So you've talked a bit about this in one of your videos before, the one titled The Only and Actual Foundation of Meaning, I believe. But could you please describe what you mean when you say the theist's problem with atheism is actually a problem with nihilism?
Great point to elaborate on, because it's very important. So typically when atheists argue with people who identify as theists, a lot of what you'll get is problems that come back to, like, well, how are you moral then without God? Like, how do you explain beauty without God? Like,
how do you decide what to value?
How do you decide what to value without God? So, like, this is the case because in meeting these people with the potentiality that their God doesn't exist, what you're actually doing is deconstructing. You're essentially like doing demolition on the foundational most pillar of the entirety of their concept of meaning. The entirety of their conception of meaning in all its myriad forms. Like, well, maybe not all. Maybe they don't think, well, no, maybe all. They think he invented language. Like Tower of Babel and all that stuff. Like that. Yeah, I think, like, so depends. even for, yeah, depends. You can't generalize, but you can't generalize, but generally speaking, the one of the main, if not the main, pillar for their concept of meaning in the first place is this God idea. For why you should be good and not a piece of shit asshole. And the reason for, like, why you should appreciate the moment, or why you should appreciate each other, or what is behind the feeling of awe or beauty. Like, all of this comes down to their God concept. So when you address the possibility that this being they believe is the reason for all of these things never was that in the first place, like,
everything becomes untethered.
It becomes untethered. Like, this thing that they were clinging to as the thing that they're the bedrock that they're building all of their concept of meaning.
For all of this, yeah.
That's where they come from in addressing your arguments. It's like, well, then how do you meaning? How do you make meaning? What do you like? How do you manage the phenomena of meaning without this God phenomena? Why aren't you out just killing people? Because I don't know how I would not be if I didn't have this God being breathing down my neck in my mind. Like, well, at least that's what feels like is being emitted when someone says something like that. You know, like if you're genuinely talking to me and saying, hey, if you don't believe in God, why aren't you out murdering people? That says that you think if you didn't believe in God, you would consider that as a viable life strategy.
I can't believe people actually would say that.
So, like, yeah.
Maybe that's why people have such a, like, negative view of atheists. Sometimes they were like, well, if atheism, then there's no reason to be
because
good.
They can't... They're met with the responsibility and burden of meaning making, because it's a responsibility and a burden, equally so. And with that, they just get scared. They're like, I can't. What? What do I decide to find meaning in, and why? Like, even though they've really been doing it all the time, and they love their pets, and they love their family, and they like good food, and they like XYZ, even though they have these meaning structures that they've been making all along, even though they pinned it on this God thing, they can't get over the... Yeah, it's essentially them being confronted with the problem of nihilism, and then like just hitting up against it.
Even them thinking it all comes from the God thing is like another form of meaning that they're generating.
Yeah, but it's a funny one because ultimately, when you're saying objective meaning exists because God, all you're really saying is that objective meaning exists because this subject said so.
Yeah,
which is really fun. It's like
God is given like a status of objectivity.
Yeah, well, yeah. Some people equate the universe to God, and again, that's a failure to comprehend the object-subject distinction. Object-subject distinction.
Great. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the theist problem with atheism actually being a problem with nihilism?
No, I think that mostly covered it. It's primarily about the fact that in having the foundational pillar of their meaning structure criticized or addressed or highlighted as potentially being false or non-existent, you're essentially challenging the entirety of their structure of meaning, which is like...
And their structure of understanding of reality.
Yeah.
It confronts them with a lot of confusion.
But more importantly, it's about like the big meaning things, like beauty and morality. And this is highlighted because of the fact that when you address these problems, they most often argue at you from the perspective of like, okay, then what morality? Like, okay, then how morality? Like, how do you, like, these are the sort of questions that they come at you from, because in acknowledging the non-existence of God, that's like revealing the main thing that God does for them in the first place. The main reason that the God concept does for them is serve as a central pillar for a lot of meaning concepts, including morality and beauty, found fundamentally.
You've called it like a pre-packaged philosophy.
Yeah.
Where it like gives answers.
Yeah, gods and gods of this tier are just like a thing that you can hold there and just like not really look at and just like build a bunch of things on, and then just it provides some sort of pseudo structure. It's the earliest, as I said in our last podcast, I think it's our earliest attempt at making sense of reality. Our ancestors' earliest attempt at making sense.
I believe you said that in your last video.
Oh yeah, somewhere. I said it somewhere. It comes to mind.
Okay, so for this next part, I've taken some other definitions of nihilism from the internet, and I want to hear your thoughts on them.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so this is the Google definition. I forget which dictionary they take it from, maybe Oxford or something. It says, nihilism, the rejection of all religious and moral principles in the belief that life is meaningless.
The belief that life is meaningless is itself a claim to meaning.
It's like saying something meaningful.
Is that a meaningful claim?
Paradoxical?
Is the claim that life is meaningless a meaningful claim? Like you're as for rejection of religious values, I think that's more incidental than it is like foundational. Like it's not like nihilism is the rejection of moral principles so much as it is comprehension of the reality of nihilism consequently leads someone to reason through a lot of moral values and find them to be lacking and inaccurate. Like it's almost like
the moral values of religion.
If you are a nihilist, if you understand the reality of nihilism, you like it's incompatible. Like you cannot believe like heaven and hell is why we are good and bad, and like love is from God, and like all these moral principles that are quote unquote religious moral principles are suddenly incompatible with the mind of someone who comprehends the reality of nihilism. So that's how I'd address that one for the first point and the second point that they make.
Oh, that's it. That's all I have.
That's all you got? You don't have like
No, I have more. Sorry,
okay,
that's
yes.
all from the Google one.
Yeah,
okay, so
okay,
the next one is from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Oh, wow, they sound official.
Nihilism is the belief that all values are baseless and that nothing can be known or communicated.
What the hell? But it's communicating something.
It's literally communicating.
C.1. See your last answer. It's attempting to communicate something while saying nothing can be communicated.
While saying that some people believe that nothing can be communicated.
As for the all values are baseless, no. That's failing to realize the fact that nihilism is about the subject-object distinction.
All values are subjective.
There you go. It's purely a commentary on the basis of values. People it's putting it in its place as okay, values are in this category, not in this category. There's no there like subjective. What is it? Reality is quote unquote objectively meaningless because the objective is never the context in which meaning exists in the first place.
Even though objective conditions can give rise to forms of meaning through subjects.
In that spirit, you may as well say reality is objectively sweet. It's like, yes, it's in some sections of some phenomena you can have the phenomena of sweetness arising, but that doesn't mean reality is objectively sweet. Just like reality isn't objectively meaningful.
Reality has the capacity to
generate things that generate meaning.
To generate sweetness.
Yeah, and to generate sweetness, and to generate color, and to generate language, and to generate a mind that thinks nothing means anything, even though it's thinking that into being.
So you think it's kind of broken to say there is no objective meaning?
I think it is, that's actually a fun one. There is no objective meaning because that's not the context of meaning. It's like there is only objective meaning in the same way that there's objective sweetness. That there's a thing that exists in reality, but like its basis is the mind. Just like the basis of sweetness is the mind. Like that's the aspect of objective reality in which this phenomena has basis. Subjectivity.
I guess people get confused about it because they think they associate God with objectiveness.
Yes, yeah, exactly. They don't quite understand the subject-object distinction, which is the main point of confusion for nihilism, and the main reason people think of it was as synonymous with pessimism, because they think, oh, reality is objectively meaningless, what a pessimistic thing, instead of finishing the sentence and being like, because the objective because the objective was never the context of meaning. It's only ever been us. It's only ever been this.
Yeah, they're like, reality is objectively meaningless, then why would I do anything at all?
Why were you doing anything all yesterday? Yeah. Because you're here.
Because they feel like they have a basis for doing things that, like, something beyond them.
Yeah, they need some sort of ultimate, like, intangible, impenetrable, indestructible pillar that, is meaning, capital N, like, even though the word meaning itself is, like, you start thinking about it, and it's just this ephemeral thing. It's like, yeah, these words have meaning, but does, like, that, like, the sound that you just heard is, like, the qualia itself meaning is blue. Like, is the sensation of blue a type of meaning relative to, like, because meaning ultimately is a arrangement mechanism. It's about, like, how information is arranged to other pieces of information, just like color perception is. It's yellow relative to this wavelength, yellow relative to this wavelength, relative to this wavelength. Language is this sound relative to this sound relative to this sound in order to make this idea relative to this idea relative to this idea. And it's just essentially a matter of arranging things relative to other things.
Yeah, creating distinctions
between
things.
Yeah, so meaning is like, it exists as a process of minds and how they arrange and approach information in order to make sense of it and coherence of it, but it's not something that, like, has objective existence external to the minds that manifest it. It's literally, it couldn't be more tight-knit to the phenomena of thought and the phenomena of perception and the phenomena of consciousness.
I do think it's funny how God is like would be just a giant subject.
Yeah.
That like perceives everything, so like the meaning comes from the God who perceives.
What would it mean to perceive anything? Like if you like a lot of the definitions of God cannot be consistently made. So for those ones entirely, I don't even humor them. Or for these sort of thought experiments, it's like, okay, but you're putting a God in the picture that is like completely nonsense. So like it doesn't even like an objective God. It's like, what do you mean? Like or a God that perceives everything at once. It's like, okay, how do you define that? Like there's all sorts of paradoxes that come up. But if we're talking about a God that can be defined, then we're just talking about an alien. Like, and that would be like just a subject. It's like, okay, this uber powerful creator being subjectivity created other subjectivities, but it's still like, even though it created us with these rules and it could have even created the universe with these particular parameters. It's like, okay, but like it itself was bound to its own objective conditions in which it manifested. Like you cannot have a subjective agent of any form or kind without having the objective reality or the objective framework for it to manifest to and from another.
Yeah, since it seems like subjects are a result of reality being arranged in certain ways.
Not only seems like, but I wager that you couldn't posit a definition for a subjectivity without also defining the objective framework in which the subjectivity emerges. I think that that's a profoundly important point.
Idealism can't even be logically defined.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That wasn't all of the one from the internet.
Let's keep going. Yeah, no, it's fine if we go on tangents like that because they're interesting.
Of course. So the first part, again, was nihilism is the belief that all values are baseless and that nothing can be known or communicated.
I think we addressed that one thoroughly.
I just think that's so ridiculous. I don't think anyone who would call themselves a nihilist
actually thinks like that and believes that, yeah.
Nothing can be known. So it continues, it is often associated with extreme pessimism and a radical skepticism that condemns existence.
Condemns existence? I think that they're just sort of making shit up with that. Like it's true in the zeitgeist. It is often associated with radical pessimism. Like that's how it's portrayed,
and
because that's the reaction to it.
Some people who
misses half of it.
Sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry for interrupting you.
The pessimistic reaction is the reaction to it that misses half of it. It's like the reality is objectively meaningless.
Yeah,
because meaning is a subjective phenomenon. It's just like the first half of it. It's like the one side of the coin instead of realizing both. It's like, yes, pessimism is a potential interpretation of nihilism. So is optimism, but so is realism. Hence, nihilistic realism.
People react to the idea of nihilism or whatever their misconception is of it or an interpretation of it from a negative light because they contrast it with their positive comforting light of having all the meaning accounted for by this
that's a good point.
Grand God.
Yeah, that is a good point. In contrast, just on its own as a reality, it's completely
neither
neutral.
Good nor bad.
It's completely neutral, but in contrast to a beautiful lie, it seems like a negative thing.
And this isn't a point I came up with. This is like reiterating stuff you've said in your videos.
Thanks for reminding.
Okay, and then it says, a true nihilist would believe in nothing, have no loyalties, and no purpose other than, perhaps, an impulse to destroy.
Oh my god, they're just like sadomasochists. Oh my god, an impulse to destroy.
It's like, well, they don't believe in God, so anything goes.
I want to first address a belief in nothing. Just the concept of believing in nothing. Like, how does one do that? How does one do that? How does one believe in nothing?
A belief is like a positive statement. Like, you have to believe in a concept of something, and nothing isn't a...
Yeah. As for them, they're just tagging more pessimistic things onto it without, saying much about the concept itself. They're just, saying, perhaps a nihilist would, have no values, no beliefs or anything, just an impulse to destroy. Yes, on one hand, there is no external correlate, and that is negative in context of the false positive that was never real, but on the other hand, it's what we've been doing all along. Like, you valuing your pets or valuing a good meal was only ever the place where meaning had existence. So like no matter, independent of what I believe, a good meal tastes good. Independent of what I believe, like my cat's a sweetheart.
I thought it was funny how they said a true nihilist would believe in nothing.
No, true Scotsman.
Because they're like defining a conception of nihilism, which is like nihilism is an abstract concept, and we define things how
we define things into existence. Like it's the no true Scotsman. It's like saying a true Catholic would believe this, or a true Scotsman would act like this.
But it's written by someone who like hasn't thought through like what it would actually mean to believe in nothing and how
they don't even conceptualize nihilism, and yet they're saying what a true nihilist would believe in.
Yeah. Okay. And also, yeah, funny to say an impulse to destroy.
Destroy.
And they say perhaps an impulse to destroy.
Like it's hilarious. It's like, how would I simulate this perspective? I mean, perhaps they would want to destroy things.
It's like, well, I guess if I thought life was like everything is meaningless, I guess I'll just get angry at reality and start destroying things. I don't know. That's how I imagine the person.
That's literally the average portrayal of nihilism. So I get why they're on that page.
Okay, next one.
All right.
And that was from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The next one's from Britannica. Nihilism, a philosophy that denies the existence of genuine moral truths and asserts the ultimate meaninglessness of life or of the universe.
Okay, so absolute moral truths. Is it ever okay to murder? Is it ever okay to steal? Or are there absolutes in that regard? Definitely.
There aren't genuine moral truths.
There aren't genuine moral truths in terms of the fact that each situation has its own hyper-specific parameters and variables to consider. Like every single specific situation involving subjects has very specific variables.
But those specific situations do have like this would absolutely be immoral within that specific situation. Like me cutting off your hand right now, that would be very immoral.
Yeah, but like then it breaks down to the situation specifics. It's like, okay, was I okay with it, or like?
Yeah, true.
But like once you lay out. Because it's not objective. It's about that's what I'm trying to say. Like you have to get down to it and be like, okay, what were the exact parameters and like what led to what, and it ultimately comes down to the context of like objective realities of the situation, like the experiences of a sentient agent, and how like their extremes and their
the arrangements that will lead them to experience suffering.
Yeah, like it's a matter of the hyper-specific arrangement of each situation, and there's no easy general principle that you can point to and say that is just objectively always the case, because it's like, well, no, because every single case is always different, even when they look identical.
Right. And then for the second part, and asserts the ultimate meaninglessness of life or of the universe.
It doesn't assert the ultimate meaningless so much as it acknowledges the context of the phenomena of meaning. The universe is very meaningful. Like there's a lot of agents in the universe that manifest the phenomena of meaning, but there's no concept of objective meaning when you get down to it. There's no way that you can even really define that into making sense, because the very phenomena of meaning in all its myriad forms can only ever be defined in context of the subjectivities that manifest it and the parameters of their subjectivities and the interactions.
Okay.
Of them.
Awesome. Next one, from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Nihilism, a viewpoint that traditional values and beliefs are unfounded and that existence is senseless and useless.
Senseless and useless.
This is the
I think that one speaks for itself. Like that one almost speaks for itself and doesn't need to be addressed. It's like a pure pessimism bias that has nothing to offer.
The first point, a viewpoint that traditional values and beliefs are unfounded. Like no. It really depends on like
it's a consequence of the realization, but it's not about that's not what it's ultimately about.
But every traditional quote unquote traditional value and belief has to be like reasoned through.
Yeah, on their own merits and individually. Like that's
so it's not like.
And that's not even about nihilism though. That's just like epistemology. That's like just skepticism. What we should do. It's not like that's a principle of nihilism or even an aspect of nihilism. If anything, it's a consequence of having the realization.
So as a nihilist, you wouldn't say that existence is senseless and useless?
No. Depends on, define your terms. Like, what use? What use does reality have to who? To what?
And how do you define sense?
And how do you define sense? Like, does the universe have sense, or is it nonsense? Is it senseless? Is it useless? Is it useful? Like, I can make use of an aspect of the universe, but then there's aspects that I can't make use of. So are those useless? Well, it's just silly.
It's like the people who wrote these definitions didn't actually think
it through. Yeah. No, definitely just silly. Onward.
And then that one from the Merriam-Webster after that, senseless and useless, is followed by the quote, nihilism is a condition in which all ultimate values lose their value. What do you think of this quote?
It's a quote. Nihilism is a situation in which all values have the context of their value revealed.
What do you mean?
Like the context of the value of values is the minds that are attributing value to them and generating the phenomenon of value. It's not saying that like values have no value. It's like, again, it gets stuck on the one side of the coin. It thinks that no objective meaning equals no meaning at all, instead of realizing that no objective meaning is a commentary on the subjective nature of meaning. It's like it's not over here, it's over here. It's in the context of minds, it's not over here in the context of the universe.
It's like religious people seem to have a hard time understanding how values could be subjective or...
Just the nature of value.
Yeah.
Just the nature of the concept of value, the nature of the concept of meaning.
Yeah.
That's what nihilism is about. It's about realizing the nature of the concept of meaning and value as being subjective instead of objective. And it allows you to slice past shit like this very easily. That's why I call it a philosophical razor.
Nice. Yeah, that quote is by Ronald H. Nash, and I looked up that this guy was an evangelical Baptist philosophy professor and Christian apologist.
Okay, yeah, so he definitely knows what he's talking
Oh
about.
no.
Onward.
From Wikipedia. There have been different nihilist positions, including that human values are baseless, that life is meaningless, that knowledge is impossible, or that some set of entities does not exist, or is meaningless or pointless. I guess they might be talking about gods.
Yeah. Most of those were addressed except for the third one.
Yeah. And then it says... In popular use, the term commonly refers to existential nihilism, according to which life is without intrinsic value, meaning, or purpose. Like, define how you define intrinsic.
Yeah, sure. It is without intrinsic, objective value, meaning, or purpose. But again, see the points made before. Like, none of what was said there hadn't been addressed except for the third point. What was that?
About the some set of entities does not exist.
No, the one before that.
That knowledge is impossible?
Yeah, I haven't addressed that one yet.
Apparently there's like epistemological nihilism. It's like...
Yeah, like I'm trying to like emphasize the fact that a lot of these definitions of nihilism are inherently inconsistent.
Yeah.
Like like you're not actually defining anything that makes sense, you're defining a contradiction. Saying that knowledge is impossible is also kind of a contradiction. Like, again,
depends how you define
is that knowledge? Statement knowledge?
Yeah.
Do you know that? Like, knowledge is impossible. Do you know that?
You're making a claim.
Boom. Like,
so the claim is...
Is the claim knowledge is impossible knowledge?
Is that impossible?
There you go. So, point addressed, onward.
A lot of contradictions, it seems, in these definitions.
That's part of why I was gravitated towards nihilism, because as soon as I started actually thinking about it, I was like, wait a second, there's something profound here, and no one is talking about it. Everyone's just like, oh, this is what Nietzsche was on about. He's like, oh shit, people are gonna, like, the problem of the reality of nihilism is going to cripple nations, because people will have to realize that it only ever was us, and people won't want to realize that. People will want to dive in the other direction, and it'll cause conflict, and it has been.
Okay. The next one is from dictionary.com, and they actually have...
Official? They have like 3 definitions?
Yeah.
I'm sure a few of them will overlap with stuff that we've already addressed, so just read them out.
Okay, number 1. Total rejection of established laws and institutions.
again, that's an incidental consequence of the realization, not
Well,
a foundational principle to the realization. And also, it doesn't even necessarily mean that. It might be incidentally.
you don't reject all laws.
No, I'd reject some laws, but I don't reject all laws. It's like it's a matter of like, okay, it's no longer a objective onus out there. It's now up to me to reason through my individual values and how much I give stock to these different claims and these different rules and these different systems that strangers came up with independent of my existence before I was born. Like all of these different systems.
How
individual ones,
following that rule, like, is it actually immoral to do this thing?
To cross a fence to go hang out on a bridge.
To cross a street in a
spot. Cross a street in a small town.
Spot that you're
in a small town
when
where it's
there's
clear.
no one's around. Yeah.
Or to like drive past a stop sign out in the middle of the country when there's absolutely no one around anywhere. Like when things like morality is situation specific, and laws do not equate to morality. In my mind, things like laws are like they don't equate to morality, and I think that a realization like nihilism highlights that because it makes the distinction between things that are just said to be like objectively this is the way that it is, and actually thinking through each individual claim to morality in context of the subjectivities that manifest it and claim it to be so. So
you wouldn't define nihilism as the total rejection of established laws and institutions?
No, and if anything, some rejection of some laws and institution is an incidental consequence. An incidental consequence of the realization of nihilism. Or the position of realism.
Especially if it's like a law from a like Islamic country that that's an institution, I guess, that you would reject.
Exactly. Like it's an incidental consequence. It's an incidental consequence of some aspects of the realization in situation-specific context.
The next one is anarchy, terrorism, or other revolutionary activity. As the definition of nihilism.
The definition of nihilism. I think they're just trying to make associations here.
People just really don't like the idea of nihilism. They're just
like anarchy is its own thing and completely independent of nihilism. Like
terrorism.
What? Terrorism again? What?
Nihilism equals terrorism.
I think there's a few more religious terrorists than there are nihilist terrorists, guys.
I don't think there's many nihilists by your definition.
Oh no, I don't think anyone anyway.
There's few people who realize that meaning is like we create our meaning.
Yeah, and there's I'm sure there's pessimists who hide behind nihilism as a justification for their pessimism. Like that's I've met them. Like a lot of nihilists have that sort of rep where they're just pessimists and they want a philosophical justification for their pessimism, so they hide behind nihilism. While in doing so, they are rejecting more than half of the concept by just focusing on the lack of objective meaning thing, and then they get dictionaries like this written about them.
And then number 3 is total and absolute destructiveness, especially toward the world at large and including oneself.
That's like malice, like masochism and sadism and hatred. And
that's not nihilism.
It's like sado-pessimism, I don't know.
You say nihilism is, that can be summed up as meaning as a subject-dependent phenomenon. That says nothing about...
In particular, it's summed up as the realization that meaning is a subjective phenomenon.
It says nothing about, destroying the world at large or...
Nope, not really, no. Yeah, no.
And then it has the example, the power-mad nihilism that marked Hitler's last years.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, that's what it was.
When people associate Hitler with atheism.
Yeah. No, it's like I don't understand a thing, but it seems like it might be bad, and there's a thing I know is definitely bad, so...
Just link the two together and call Hitler a nihilist.
Yeah, why not?
Number 4, philosophy. 1. An extreme form of skepticism, the denial of all real existence. That's like one thing you can't deny, that existence.
I think, therefore, I don't exist!
I'm not experiencing anything, guys. It's an illusion.
Yeah, some brains can break that way, I guess, but that would be more a medical condition than it would be a philosophical one. Or it would be more a medical condition than it would be a philosophical position.
Or then it says, or the possibility of an objective basis for truth. The denial of the possibility of...
The denial of the possibility for an objective basis for truth. Depends on how you define truth.
Well, truth is always like us just subjectively describing things based on our
like,
observed things.
is truth like what is accurate of reality, like the situation of reality, like the way in which reality is arranged? If that is the case, then yeah, we'll never understand all of how reality is arranged. But like
There's no ultimate
like
truth.
it's gradients. Like we understand more today than we did yesterday. We understand more in 100 years than we did 100 years ago. Like
As a nihilist, you would reject the quote-unquote ultimate truth of God.
I would say that is a undefinable concept, like an unfounded concept. It's like you're just saying things. It's like ultimate truth of God. What?
People say it because it sounds.
It's those are words. Those are nice, fluffy, spooky language. But I don't.
And then
think that makes sense.
Yeah. Then the second one from the philosophy section of it is just says nothingness or non-existence. Nihilism equals nothingness or non-existence.
No, I'd say nothingness or non-existence equals nothingness or non-existence. Nil, like the root word nil, N-I-L,
yeah,
is synonymous, but like, I know.
Okay, and then I think this is the last one from the Cambridge Dictionary. A belief that all political and religious organizations are bad.
We addressed that one already.
Or a system of thought that says that there are no principles or beliefs that have any meaning or can be true.
Again, addressed.
That there's no beliefs that can be true?
Yeah, we addressed that.
Okay.
We addressed that, and that there can be no meaning, and yeah.
Okay.
All thoroughly torn to shreds, I hope.
So as a nihilist, then you don't outright reject the idea of truth.
No, it depends on your definition of the term. Like it honestly comes down to the definition of the term, because like there are things that are accurate in terms of the arrangement of different phenomena and different shapes of reality, and that essentially is, in my understanding, what truth is. It's like, oh, is it true that you took the garbage out? It's like, yeah, it is true that these arrangements of this phenomena has occurred. It's like, oh, is it true that this substance emits this wavelength when heated to this temperature? It's like, oh yeah, no, that seems to do that when that happens. So like, there's consistencies and patterns to reality, and those consistencies and patterns can be discerned, but there will always be degrees to which reality cannot be plotted, or like we're just pushing the frontier. Like frontier will always just be a little bit further past us, and it'll be never easily solved, and there will never be one answer that is the answer for all time. There will never be one thing that is just true outright or true preemptively, except for maybe existence itself. Like the fact that things exist, or that existence exists.
Reality exists.
That one's even cool because you can't define it not.
Yeah.
Like you literally can't define nothing. You can't define a lack of a context, a lack of like anything at all. Even if like there were no subjectivities to experience anything at all, that doesn't mean that there isn't anything at all. It just means that the arrangement of things is completely different. And like, but yeah, I don't think nothing is definable. And I like, if anything is quote unquote objectively true, I think it might be that, just existence itself. Like things exist. If there's an objective, true, ultimately true statement to be made that cannot be refuted, things exist.
Nice. So what's your overall thought on dictionaries after hearing all these definitions?
I think that I'm not surprised. I think that the people who write dictionaries are just like
people.
Just people. Like it's people who hear an idea and write a thing and like learn from the culture, and just like just because they're the person behind the keyboard or behind the pen or behind the typewriter when they write.
The dictionary writer doesn't have some special insight into reality.
They don't have objective authority over the concept of meaning and meaning making, because that's essentially what you're doing when you're documenting words, or when you're making words. You're just meaning making. And I don't think that any of these meaning makers, these fellow meaning makers that were attempting to conceptualize this idea and like
abstract
to take this idea and like nail it down and really like address its principles and what the concept like implies and how it is best thought about to actually address the full implications of it. I think they didn't do that at all, and that every single one of them fell on the pessimistic side
And most
of
people
not
aren't
actually thinking through the
honest
implications.
philosophers, and it shows from
Like
this.
they're people. They're average people. So like, what do they believe? What do they think? Like
Yeah.
generally, like it's sure you're writing a dictionary, but what are your biases? What do you think in order to like write this stuff without actually thinking it through?
It's funny how people sometimes quote from a dictionary as if it holds some sort of
prime authority,
truth, or the like final, that's the last word on the matter, because this
person over here agrees with me.
Because this person wrote that this means this.
Yeah. Their definitions, when they aren't outright like bollocks, like equating it to masochism and pessimism, always fall on the side of pessimism. Like they fall on the side of only seeing half of the coin, only realizing that, or only acknowledging that meaning is objectively not something that exists, instead of finishing the sentence and realizing that
none of them said that meaning is subject dependent.
No, but they all said, or most of them said, that meaning objectively does not exist, instead of acknowledging the flip side of that. And I think that most of the concept, most of the richest discourse to be had on the concept, and most of the philosophical implications of the concept come from acknowledging both aspects of that in tandem, instead of just the one side, which is all the dictionaries talk about and all the public talks about, is the equating it to pessimism, and then just like saying nihilistic when they mean to say like someone who's destroying things, or like not caring about something, or like apathetic or pessimistic.
Yeah, I think I probably once conceived of nihilism as like, well, like ultimately we all like die and all of it is
ultimately nothing matters.
Like
it just forgets the context.
We're going to be forgotten, and
it forgets the context.
It's interesting how the meaning of words can change with time.
Because
and especially when it's something more abstract like nihilism, as opposed to like the definition of a spoon or a leaf.
Yeah, exactly. But like,
even the definition,
I'm not even
of
redefining it so much as I am like just expanding the definition to encompass the entirety of the concept.
You're trying to make it more
coherent and honest and consistent, and like, because like a lot of the definitions provided are inconsistent. Like belief in nothing. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like, nothing can be known. Is that a knowledge statement? Like,
impossible.
Yeah,
knowledge is impossible. Non-existence. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
My definition seeks to have consistency and encompass the entirety of the concept in order to emphasize its profundity, instead of ignoring its profundity for a pessimistic sidestep.
Great. Yeah, it's also funny how a word like nihilism is defined in such a myriad different ways across different dictionaries. They can't even agree on a definition of nihilism.
There were some commonalities, but they can't seem to agree. And when they do agree, it's like really dumb. It's like what? It is. It's really dumb to say that nihilism is equated to pessimism, or like destructive urges. And
nothing means anything.
Yeah, nothing really means anything. Belief in nothing. Nothing can be known. Like that's like, what do you mean? That's ridiculous. Who would believe that? Who would claim to believe that?
Okay, I think that's all for that one. So
hell yeah, that was a long
segment.
question. Fun one though. Fun segment.
Okay. The next question is, which we've already kind of addressed, so we can keep it short or just skip right over it, is what is objectivity, subjectivity, and intersubjectivity, and why is understanding these concepts important?
Well, I guess, we've sort of addressed it, but not directly to the point. So, the objective is the context in which, like, it's the larger context in which other things unfold. Like reality. Like other objective things unfold, of course. Like objective leads to more objective, leads to more objective in terms of, like, it being the context of itself, but it's also the context of, like, any possible subjectivity. Like, a subjectivity being a manifestation of a mind, like a sentient agent perceiving an aspect of an objective reality, manifesting a loop contained within it. And intersubjectivity would be about the aspects of sentience, the aspects of consciousness that are similar across sentient agents, that are the way that they are as a result of the objective circumstances in which they emerge.
Wow, that's a lot of jargon.
Wow, that's a lot of jargon.
I'm just imagining people being like, I don't understand what
Well, like, how hard was that to follow? That was pretty good.
It was good. You just talk fast, and if people
Yeah.
have never heard these concepts before, they might be like, "Oh, what?"
Okay.
As an example, can you explain how a concept like money relates to objective, subjective, or intersubjective?
So, money exists as an idea within the minds of those creatures who hold it as such in the brain. Like it maintains a an objective shape within the neurological architecture of sentient agents that conceptualize it, that think of it, that validate it as an idea. So it objectively exists in that like there are ones and zeros on computers in terms of like the arrangement of the transistors, and there's like chunks of metal and there's chunks of paper, and there's neural architecture in organisms that corresponds to it. But like objectively, in terms of like outside of the context of the minds that have neural architecture dedicated to it, money doesn't have like a value in and of itself. It's just a thing. Like it's a thing in terms of it just being an item. It's a thing in terms of it just being data on networks, and it's a thing in terms of being neural architecture. But it doesn't have an objective existence beyond that. That is the extent to which it has an objective existence. It's primarily its existence is something that operates and thrives intersubjectively. That being within the interactions and within the interactions of sentient agents that validate the concept. So money is something that intersubjectively has value because I can walk into the store and other sentient agents that are similar to me will agree on the concept and its function. And in that regard, it has a objective existence, again, in regards to the neurocorrelates, but mostly a subjective and intersubjective existence in regards to the fact that like I value my $20 for its potential to buy food, and so too does the person from which I'm buying food. Like we both just validate this idea that is wrapped around it, but
So
that
it's
idea has no objective correlate beyond the neurology.
the subjects, yeah. So it's a form of meaning shared amongst
It is,
subjects.
yeah, and a lot of meaning is like that, where it's an intersubjective phenomena. Like it's yes, ultimately a subjective phenomena because it comes down to the individuals who manifest the idea, but it's also an intersubjective phenomena because it bridges the gap, just like this languages, just like the sounds I'm making right now bridge the gap of our subjectivities in order to intersubjectively communicate information. Speaking of that, like I've talked about it multiple times before, but I'll just throw in the science bit. How science is a means by which subjects can intersubjectively verify what is most likely true of objective reality, independent of subjective speculation or perception or beliefs. So that comes back to the root question, which is like, how do you define subjectivity, objectivity, and intersubjectivity? That's a really good indication of it, because subjectivity is like the experiences and thoughts and perceptions and the phaneron that we're all trapped in and experiencing, whereas intersubjectivity is the commonalities of those, and those commonalities are based in the objective reality that manifests all subjects, and the fact that we share a environment and conditions that manifest us. So yeah.
So money is a form of meaning, and that only exists in certain types of minds because a cat has no idea what money is and can't.
And same with a person who just like came to full sentience without ever hearing of the concept.
Oh,
I know
yeah.
such a person is rare, but like it's a hypothetical possibility where they just like, what? You guys trade tokens for life?
Yeah,
What the fuck are you doing?
like an idea that has to be shared between.
It has to be shared, it has to be believed, it has to be validated.
Okay, great.
Just like language, I guess, in
Just
that
like
sense.
the
Like
concept
language
of
needs
Canada.
to be. Yeah, or the concept of Canada, exactly. But yeah, language itself is a good example of that too. Because if we didn't agree that these sounds correlate to the thoughts that they're correlating to right now, then it would just be blah 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 blah.
Like Canada could, for example, stop existing as a concept if like all the subjects who bring that form of meaning
or
into
South
existence.
Sudan can start being a country just because people started like that's the newest country in the world.
Oh.
Just because a bunch of people decided that okay, this is a country now. That's where we are. We're in South Sudan, everybody.
But something like an electron would keep existing.
The actual conditions of objective external reality haven't changed. The only thing that has changed is the neural architecture of sentient agents who decided to adopt a new concept into their frameworks.
Canada like the idea of Canada can stop existing. But
without
like,
the objective reality changing.
yeah, but like if we all stop believing in the existence of electrons, that doesn't mean that they're going to stop existing because they're not just a form
But
of
analogous would be like we can all stop believing in Canada, but nothing happens to the land that Canada is on. Like nothing. Like everyone stops believing in Canada. Okay, cool. There's still a Quebec. There's still a.
Unless people stop.
Well, you stop calling it that. I'm just saying there's still the
there's
land.
still
There's still the area that correlates to the thing that we call.
Stuff there.
Yeah, exactly. Like we can stop calling it Quebec. We can stop calling it Canada, but there's still objectively like a thing that exists. Just like we can stop calling it electrons and like change our entire framework, but there's still like
a phenomena there happening.
Or like we can start like it comes back to realism where you can believe whatever you want about reality. You can talk about it, whatever, you can conceptualize it and arrange it in whatever way, but actual reality exists as it does, independent of any of this stuff. So our subjective arrangement schema and our subjective interpretations and beliefs of or about reality don't have any impact on reality itself. It just impacts our interpretations and our frameworks.
Okay, next question. So, what is the link between morality and realism? I'd imagine you'd say that being a realist can allow you to behave more morally, but can you explain why that is the case? A good example I think that comes to mind is like about if you're like a religious person who thinks that something is moral because I think we might have talked about this in the last video a bit.
A bit, yeah. I was just trying to think. If you're operating with bad information within reality, then you're liable to make a lot of bad decisions. Not just in terms of like, if I don't know how to build a shack and I try with terrible axioms that I'm going to build a structure that'll collapse, but like, if you don't honestly approach the reality of a situation, like if you don't, person has a respiratory sensitivity, and you just walk in smoking, and you don't like they start coughing, and like people start going to them to help and stuff, and you're just standing there smoking, and you don't even like consider it, like the impact of your actions. Like it's a matter of like not acknowledging a reality of the situation and then making a decision that from that position of ignorance causes harm.
Like you can think something is wrong that's not actually.
You can think something is wrong that isn't actually wrong, or you can do the opposite where you think something is right that isn't actually right.
Or ethical to do that isn't.
Yeah, and more often than not, it stems from a position of misunderstanding and ignorance that is rooted in not accurately comprehending the legitimate variables of a situation. And usually that comes from like one's base, most philosophical approach of like being open to considering the variables of a situation in the first place. Or like just coming at a situation with a prepackaged approach and then just like going with that and then like just doing the simplest heuristics and the simplest ways of dealing with the situation instead of like comprehending the entirety of the variables. And a lot of moral failings come down to poor reasoning. I think it's a theme that we see throughout a lot of history in the world currently. Is that a lot of the worst things happening are because people just don't understand what the hell they're doing. Like people don't understand the reality of the situation that they're within, and because of their lacking understanding, it leads to harm that they themselves don't even comprehend or see because their framework doesn't even allow for them to see it. And I think realism is important there because you have to be willing to change what you think you understand. And like a lot of people aren't willing to change what they think they understand. They think they understand something and that's that. Instead of like just being open to changing your interpretation of things. Yeah, I don't know what more to say beyond that really.
Oh, that's great. Next is, what is existentialism to you? As I know this is part of your part of the philosophical framework, and what is the existentialist pursuit, as you call it?
Yeah, they goes hand in hand.
And when did you conceptualize it? I assume it was probably something you realized or tried pursuing before you put a name to it.
Yeah, I definitely. It's been in the works for a while, but it's more like about. It's ultimately about how.
It's like a consequence of nihilism.
Almost, yeah. It's like after the realization, like it's definitely higher order than nihilism and realism, which are more foundational. It's more about how yeah, existentialism and the existentialist pursuit are relatively synonymous in my mind. They're about the it's about the ways that you decide what you value. Yeah, the choice of what you believe and what you value and why in context of things like the reality of nihilism or things like the reality of realism. I would even say that realism is reality, the reality that it is what it is, independent of what's thought about it. Or like the reality of death. It's like once you are at terms with certain realities of our situation, what values are you to make in context of those understandings? So once I understand the reality of nihilism, how is it that I construct a framework of morality from that perspective? Like once I understand that uh, death is real, how do I spend my time, or how do I view the moments of the beings around me and whatnot? It's yeah, it's about what values you what values you create, what meaning you manifest in context of what is most likely true of the situation that we're in. And the existentialist pursuit is essentially just like the lifelong endeavor to continuously forge your reality. Sorry, I wasn't sure that. Trying to forge your values and your meaning in context of what you best understand of reality, and constantly updating it as you learn more about more.
So it's a lifelong pursuit then.
Yeah, definitely. Well, as long as yeah, it's almost like just acceptance of the responsibility of meaning making. Like once you acknowledge that there's no objective basis for it, and that it was only ever relevant in the context of minds, it's a mind game. It's a matter of like what we do and how we think. It's an acceptance of the mantle of like the responsibility and burden of meaning making. There's a way to think about it.
Interesting. Can you give an example of how it informs your thoughts or actions in day-to-day life?
It like comes into play all over the place. Like when it comes to like what media I decide to consume, or like what thoughts I decide to humor, or like what sort of what I let get to me. Like it's all about just putting things in context, putting things in the larger context of what is real and what is profound, and letting go of the insignificant things and letting go of the shallow things, just by putting them in context and thinking of them and reasoning through them in context of the reality of our situation.
Why is absurdism one of the core parts of the philosophy? Or is it even, would you call it a core part?
I wouldn't necessarily call it like core to the level of nihilism and realism, but it might be on the same level as existentialism in regards to its importance. Absurdism is more about.
Is it like a reaction to existence?
It's like a fundamental acknowledgement of the strangeness of existing at all. Like it's an ultimate context provider of like just oddness that is like a reserve of what's the word? I guess the word might be humility, like just
the ultimate blackness of existence. Yes. It's like the normalization blind spot comes off.
Yeah, it's like the full removal of the normalization blind spot. It's a good way to talk about it or think about it. It's like the absolute absence of the blind spot of the normal, and just the pure strangeness. I'm almost going to say like absurdity, but it's funny because it's absurdism. But just like the pure ridiculousness to having existed at all in the first place. And I think that it's important because it provides it's like one of those realities of our situation that I talked about in context of existentialism, and like how we must shape our values in context of the realities of our situation. One of the realities of our situation is the fact that it's just whack that we exist at all. It's a fundamental pillar because of its trueness, like its reality, like just how like in context of a framework of existence that tries to make sense of existence, like what we're trying to do, there's just some aspect to it that is just inevitably like strange and absurd and ridiculous, and that is where that fits in. It's like it's an acknowledgement that underneath it all, it's like I say it sometimes that it's the contrast of the reality of nihilism and the pursuit of existentialism, of the reality that like it's all just in our heads, and yet pursuing it anyway. And just like there's multiple points in philosophy and in life in general where things are just absurd.
Yeah, there's absurdities inherent to the reality of our situation as complex.
I have to eat, or I will die.
Yeah, as being complex yet somewhat rudimentary information processing machines with sentience and a bunch of evolved behavioral tendencies, and existing at a random point in time by no choice of our own. Like, there's just so many aspects of all of this that is like, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's just an acknowledging of certain realities of our situation.
Next question. I guess we've sort of covered this, but maybe not explicitly. The question is, how would you define truth?
Oh, cool. Yeah, we touched on this one a little bit.
Like, truth itself is is just an arbitrary word that we define how we.
Yeah, it's. I think it's about what. Again, I said it decently earlier, but essentially, it's about what the actual structures of reality are. It's like what statements we can make, what thoughts that we can have, what beliefs that we can form that accurately correspond to the shapes and phenomena that exist.
That we observe.
That exist, that can be observed, that can be interacted with, measured, that can be understood.
Interesting.
So, like, I can say, it's true that Harry Potter's wand was grey. And it's like, okay, sure, in this framework, in this particular thing, it's true within that. Like, it corresponds to that. But, like, if we're talking about capital T, quote unquote, truth about reality type thing, not like just truth as a concept, because truth as a concept is like, it's true that 2 + 2 = 4, even though those are just symbols and they're meaningless, and it only is true within this framework. But if we're talking about reality correlates, then it's about what shapes and phenomena of reality are what. Like, how is reality shaped? And the discerning of how reality is shaped is in large part the domain of science, of like trying to figure out what shapes are actually like corresponding to reality. And it's you can have true concepts, like again 2 + 2 = 4, but that's only within a framework. Like, I can have true grammar, like the sentences that I am formulating right now make sense because they are following a accurate and acceptable structure. But like, that's only within framework truth, whereas the truth in reality at large, again, is just about like the structure of reality. And the quest for truth, the endeavor to uncover truth, is an endeavor to have a accurate representation of reality within one's mind, or at least of aspects of phenomena of reality. A fragment of it, because we're limited.
So, like, a statement like water will start boiling or changing from liquid to
at this
gas.
pressure and this temperature.
Yeah, that's
yeah, like that. Like, that's as close as we get to
statement.
To a true statement. But like, all of them are inherently limited because you're not saying everything about a thing, and like it's also conditional. It's like, under these pressures, in this temperature, under these exact conditions, this happens. But like, you change that and the truth changes, because like, but it's all about like just what, like, carbon atom seems to be like this. It functions in this way. It has meant like this is a shape that reality takes, and it's consistent. And when we like, yeah.
So we can describe aspects of reality, and
we can make true statements and we can make false statements about the actual structure of reality, and we can verify or discredit these claims by investigating and acknowledging reality itself. Otherwise, like, you can't, because like, I can argue fictional Harry Potter stuff with someone, and like, there's no way we can verify except to like address the source material.
Mm-hmm. Which could be open for interpretation.
But that's an analogy for reality. It's like, let's address the source material. Let's go check out the source material, the actual reality, and see what maps. So it's like that.
Interesting.
It's my conception of it, anyway. Who knows if it's true?
Why is science important?
Science is important, so we're not just confused as shit. Like, so we're not just running around like.
It's
yelling at each other about like what my imaginary friend said, and like just it's important because it serves as a method by which to distinguish what is likely true and what is likely not in terms of what we define truth as just a moment ago. So subjects inherently are whack, are like strange. Like I perceive things differently based on how hungry I am. I perceive things differently based on the temperature of the environment I'm in, or the mood that I'm in, or subjectivity itself is chaotic and inconsistent, and like you can perceive the length of a stick as being shorter just by like social pressure. Like just like there's things in us that bias our perspective all over the place, and we aren't really good at just like discerning truth, at like figuring out what patterns in reality are accurate and consistent across time. And science exists as a way by which we can like figure out what patterns are consistent independent of the inconsistencies of our subjectivities.
As a way to try to overcome some of our
biases?
Yes,
well, a lot of them, yeah, because we're inherently biased, we're inherently chaotic, we're inherently not good at building consistent frameworks of representing reality.
And we're inherently confused about reality.
Yes, so we devise a method that allows us to circumvent these things by taking us out of the equation as much as possible, and by acknowledging the principle of realism as foundational, of just realizing that there is an objective reality, it exists independent of us, let's figure out what it is.
Or find ways to conceptualize
it. But first and foremost,
patterns we see in reality.
Yes, but first and foremost, to describe these patterns that we see in reality, independent of subjective speculation and the bickering that comes with it. Science exists to overcome the limitations of subjective speculation and the argumentation that comes with just I think this. Well, I think this. It's not just I think this. Well, I think this so much as it is I think this. Well, I think this. Let's go test out our hypotheses and come back.
Let's.
Like, okay, you think this? Cool, that's a nice hypothesis. I think this. Let's go test our hypotheses and figure out what is likely actually true, independent of like the things that you're claiming and the things that I'm claiming. Because it's not about you or me. It's about what is actually likely to be true of reality. And that's what a system like science is predicated on, which is its main epistemic value. Like the epistemic value of science is in its capacity to help subjectivities navigate the woods, like the chaos of biases, in order to figure out what is most likely true of objective reality, independent of subjective speculation.
So it has epistemic value, but we haven't touched on the fact that it also has the potential to have like ethical value.
I think ethical value is subsequent.
Due to the
It's subsequent to epistemic value.
Like you have to have more knowledge of reality, you can better survive.
Once you have a better comprehension of what is actually true of reality, you can better make moral decisions.
Yeah, or just decisions that lead to less suffering. I guess that's a moral decision. Like understanding to wash your hands before us doing a surgery, and this will lead to less.
Yeah.
Or a lot of stuff, and then we can use our knowledge to develop medicine and foods and stuff and improve our lives. But it can also lead to it has the potential to lead to more destruction than we otherwise would be capable of.
Which science?
Yeah.
Well, because it's just uncovering information, and it's about what we do with it. Like, it's a neutral thing that is just information.
Increases our capacity to manipulate reality.
There you go. It increases our capacity to manipulate reality in ways that are consistent and reliable and actually work.
Yeah.
And that can lead to us building amazing things that make life better for all of us, and it can lead to us building horrible things that make life worse for all of us.
Yes, that's a good way to sum it up, I think. Next question. Why do you think most people are not more intellectually honest or realists?
Fear and the culture. First and foremost, people have a fear of their ignorance, and they have a fear of death. They have a fear of answers to big questions that they didn't want. Like, they didn't want the answer to be one way, but it is that way, and it's deeply upsetting, and there's like something in us that avoids the scary answers to questions, and we'd much rather have a beautiful lie than face an ugly truth. Like even if it's somewhat obvious that it's a lie, like we'd much rather pretend that it isn't and justify it. Not even a lot of people, most people. Unfortunately, it's the case that most people would rather believe the things that they wish were true than be confronted with a reality that they just don't want to be true. I think that's a big part of it, and then another big part of it is the culture. The culture incentivizes people to not think things through and to not be intellectual. Like the culture incentivizes reactivity and impulsiveness and shallow vanity and that plus our innate, like it's not one or the other, it's both, but like that integrated with our innate fear of things that we don't want to be true, like things like death, things like God not existing, like our innate fear of things not our innate fear of the things that we don't want to be true, coupled with our group capacity to like distract and bring out like the most surface level traits in one another and amplify those, lead to a situation in which most people don't want to think complexity of reality because one, it's socially disincentivized, and two, it's psychologically disincentivized because it's uncomfortable.
And it's just, so it's unlikely that like a mind that comes into this reality, this point in time, is going to like bump into ideas that will make them question their reality, and it's unlikely that a mind will inherently like chaos into a realist perspective.
Yeah.
Because we have like
there's so many things against
like
them.
Evolved biases.
Like there's psychological and social and psychosocial reasons as to why it won't be likely to occur, and as to why the interests of people are likely to be shallow or like hobbyistic and not really holistically intellectual or like philosophically inclined. Like so as Andreas says, exactly. But as Andreas says, most people are philosophically asleep.
Did you say that?
I think he said something along those lines. Yeah. It was his polite way of talking about the people who don't question the things that they wish were true, or question the things that they believe.
Yeah, philosophically asleep. If you are someone who doesn't question your understanding of your beliefs, or why you think the way you do and stuff. Okay, interesting. We have the cards stacked against us then, just by the nature of what we are, to become
to perpetuate poor reasoning.
No, the cards are stacked against us to
become intellectual. Yes.
To become intellectual.
Yeah.
Okay. Why is atheism pretty taboo in our society?
Because the existence of atheists faces theists with the fact that people can live without these systems of belief and still, like it confronts them with the possibility that they might be wrong. Like it's a living reminder that like, oh shit, there's people who don't believe any of this stuff that matters so much to me as such a foundational pillar to my entire meaning structure, and these people just don't think that it's true. They don't think it's legitimate, and just like the fact alone of like having a fantastical story that you believe and value a lot, and then having someone not believe you that your fantastical story is true, is just like an inherently upsetting thing. And then they feed each other with that. Like it's socially reaffirmed. Like it's
what do you mean?
It's socially legitimized to not like atheists. Like it becomes a feedback loop where it's like they already have that predilection where they don't want to like these people because you remind me of the fact that I could be wrong, and you remind me of the fact that like you don't believe my fantastical story that means a lot to me.
It's like you don't believe the things I want to be true.
Yes, and that person over there agrees with me that you're a bad person for it. And like most people agree with me that you're a bad person for it, and like we're going to amplify each other's position just by the fact that we share that position. And now you're the bad guy.
Yeah, that's like a failure in reasoning to think, well, everyone around me thinks atheists are bad, so that's justification for that.
Just like Sapolsky mentioned, like we're the most hated group, like with the like more hated than like rapists. Just like people who don't believe in God.
The thing about the like shoebox, if you have the word atheist on it, it's more
it
likely
won't
to get
delivered.
Lost in the mail.
Yeah. Yep. It's a negative.
People have such a negative association with it?
Because people don't want to be reminded of the possibility that they're wrong. People don't want to even consider the possibility that they're wrong, let alone have someone actively reminding them.
Because most people aren't realists.
Because most people don't want to be wrong. Most people don't want to consider the possibility of being wrong because their epistemic intention is not to understand reality as best as I possibly can. Their epistemic goal is reaffirm the thing that I want to be true.
Most people's beliefs aren't incidental to them.
No, they're a very grafted part of their ego. Like a very tightly knit piece that they've just attached to themselves. It's like, no, this is part of me now. My beliefs, my opinions, these are a part of me. And if you criticize them and if you address them, you're attacking me. Why are you attacking me? I'm going to attack you now by literally attacking you.
A lot of people consider beliefs to be part of their identity instead of seeing them as just incidental.
When we talked about realism, we should have mentioned that. That's one of an important aspect of
mentioning it now.
An important aspect of realism is not identifying by your beliefs, not attaching to your beliefs, not attaching your ego to your beliefs. They're incidental. You're incidental. I think we talked about it a little bit, but
yeah, your beliefs should, from a realist perspective, beliefs should be updated. You should have your beliefs be justified.
Never
based
static.
On
always 100% willing to update your beliefs as you learn new information. Yeah, and as soon as you stop being willing to update your beliefs as you acquire new information and new understanding, that's the point of intellectual stagnation.
So part of being a realist is exposing.
It's more about the existentialist pursuit, but it comes from being a realist.
Exposing yourself to new information, you're not afraid of being of exposing yourself
learning
to
something
stuff
new
that could suggest that you are wrong.
In fact, you're interested in it.
Yeah,
I want to be proven wrong. I want to be proven wrong such that I can hone myself to be more likely to be right. Being proven wrong, being shown that a position I held was just completely and utterly bonkers and that makes absolutely no sense. It's oh, cool, okay, now I have a more accurate representation of reality and I'm less confused. As long as you're not an asshole about it, then it's no, this is just about information. People sometimes equate it. It's oh, I'm being corrected, you're an asshole for correcting me. They equate it automatically instead but then there's a difference when it's actually being an asshole while correcting someone. But some people just equate being corrected with a negative thing, which is hilarious to me because being corrected is a favor. It's oh, no, actually, the thing is this way and not that way, and here's the reasoning. It's oh, okay, cool, thank you. Now I'm working with better information.
I guess we've sort of addressed this already, but I'll see if you have any comments.
That's half the questions you're leading with that.
Yeah. Do you think some people are basically immune to reason, that some beliefs are so much a part of them that they are very likely to never have them changed? Why do you think that is? Why do people get so emotionally invested in ideas? I think you already answered that part. And what does it even mean to say that a belief is a part of someone?
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. Immune to reason. Well, yeah, a lot of people don't want to even consider the possibility of being wrong. A lot of people don't even want to, they don't want to know. They don't want to know, they don't want to understand, they want to believe. And if you have a position where you're that philosophically closed off, where your philosophy is purely centered around the reaffirmation and the protecting of the things that you want to be true, then you've essentially locked yourself into a position where you can't even consider the possibility of being wrong, so you're never going to grow and you're never going to learn, and you have made yourself immune to reasoning.
A lot of people don't want to be confronted with their own confusion.
Or with the possibility that they're wrong. With the possibility that something that they want to be true isn't. And with the epistemic responsibility of restructuring their beliefs in restructuring their beliefs and opinions in relation to the new information. So they don't want to have to undergo the neurological restructuring of updating a belief system or updating it. It takes a lot of energy. It's neurologically intensive, as I've mentioned, and metabolically expensive to learn things and to restructure your brain. And
psychologically uncomfortable.
And psychologically uncomfortable because of that. I think that it's literally a result of of the energy intensiveness.
So, being quote-unquote immune to reasoning means that, like, there's some ideas that people just, like, no matter how you approach it, it's, like, very unlikely that they'll ever...
They're not interested in considering the possibility of being wrong.
Yeah, they're like...
That's it.
They think they're 100% correct about
That's
something,
not true,
and they're
though.
not even...
Because if they thought they were 100% true, they'd be
"Oh,
willing to
I'll
consider
argue
new
it."
information. But, like, no, there's something, like, there's this insecure certainty. It's like, sure, they have certainty, but it's like this insecure certainty that isn't willing to even risk itself in the slightest, and that gets very upset at the concept of doing so. Because, yeah, I think it comes back to how neurologically intensive it is to restructure just to restructure an entire framework of thought, like an entire mind's perception of reality, because a lot of the time these delusions are, like, very foundational and very, like, close to the bottom, very, like, first principles type things. And it leads to a crisis mode, essentially, when you engage in.
It's an existential crisis, yeah.
Quintessentially, yeah.
People don't want to often face things that involve them like feeling really uncomfortable and uncertain and confused, and
which it has it all.
Throws off their, like, entire, like, how they... Yeah, their philosophical...
And things like atheism or whatever have all of that, because it addresses it on every level. So it's just like, nope, this is uncomfortable because of the implications of this being true. This is uncomfortable because it requires me to do a lot of reasoning, and this is uncomfortable because, like, culturally, and, like, there's many different things stacked against it.
Yeah. Why do you think learning is so important? Why shouldn't a person just coast and enjoy being entertained and whatnot? Shouldn't people just be able to do and enjoy their lives however they want to, so long as they're not causing suffering to other people?
I think that the process of learning is important because it informs the existentialist pursuit. Like, by understanding more about the reality of our situation, we can make better informed decisions about when to act and when not to act, and what to do and what not to do. As for entertaining ourselves to death, I think on some level it's a foregoing of epistemic responsibility to spend your entirety on, like, fiction, like, never endeavoring to comprehend more about reality or to make more informed decisions, or to inform yourself more. Is in some way a sidestepping of epistemic responsibility in favor of hedonism. It's like, I just want to have good experiences. I don't want to endeavor to comprehend reality, nor do I want to deal with the consequences of the implications of the things that I come to understand. So I would rather just have good experiences. And in my mind, it's not necessarily the most epistemically responsible position, but, like, it's not as bad as, like, going out and hurting people, I guess. But, like,
I think Bertrand Russell has put it, I don't remember the exact quote, but he said it's like you're going to the theater and have the chance to see this, like, beautiful play, and you, like, forego that opportunity to just, like, spend time. I don't think he actually said it like this, but, like, the idea of, like, just, like, looking the other way, like, and the analogy is, like, the theater of its reality and all the things that are out there for you to learn and understand. But I was thinking that one of the potential problems with the amusing yourself to death approach to life is the fact that since we're, like, inherently confused on some level, like, that's our default state, as you said, if you don't work on lessening your confusion all throughout your life, and just by the nature of what we are as these flawed, imperfect people, like, you're more likely to behave more immorally than you otherwise...
Or more basally.
More basally than you otherwise
would have had you informed yourself and worked on your critical thinking skills and your development of understanding about reality.
Yeah, so like we kind of touched on, the realist pursuit can allow you to behave more.
The existentialist pursuit, you mean?
Oh, no, just sorry. Being a realist can allow you to behave more morally.
Yeah, more ethically. It's when you asked the question, that was my initial response to it, but I don't know what to say more beyond that. Like how you have to inform yourself about the reality in which you exist in order to make accurate, moral, responsible, reasonable decisions within it.
Yeah, like you might be someone...
And it's a foregoing of the existentialist pursuit and one's epistemic responsibility to just dive into hedonism.
Yeah, someone might spend all their time, say, obsessing over, I don't know, like Star Wars or Harry Potter stuff, and like think that they're like not harming anyone at all and like it's fine, but they might be, say, eating factory farmed meat or like...
Well, even without taking into consideration other aspects like that, they're hurting their own moral and intellectual potential, and by extension, the moral and intellectual potential of those they interact with. Like by like just getting really into comic books and just like really caring about like what happened to the Hulk last week. You're wounding your own intellectual and moral capacity.
One of the realities of our situation is that we have the capacity to improve our existences, but if
Be
you
better
just
and better
dive
moral
into
agents.
If you just dive into like the comic books or whatever, then you're relying on other people to sustain the conditions that allow you to spend all your time reading comic books, and hope you just have to hope that like other humans won't fuck things up such that you won't be able to do the thing you want anymore.
Yeah, and you're hindering the intellectual progress of not just yourself, but of those around you by not participating in the intellectual progress.
Yeah, you're not furthering your own intellectual understanding, so you're like in a way you're limiting yourself to like other potential avenues that might even result in like a more meaningful existence. Which,
for the sake of short-sighted positive analysis.
Yeah, but from the perspective of someone who is like obsessed with comic books, they don't have that knowledge available to them. They don't know that there is like other horizons or whatever, other points on the moral landscape of higher well-being, perhaps. So like you can't really blame them, be like, you're an immoral person for doing
No,
this.
it's not necessarily an immoral thing so much as it is
it's like
you are wasting your potential.
Yeah,
like you're forsaking your intellectual and moral potential, as I said a minute ago, as well as you're sidestepping your existential pursuit and your epistemic responsibility. Your responsibility to get a coherent grasp on what is accurate about reality. Being your epistemic responsibility, which is something that's forgotten. But yeah, that's a good spot to end that question.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
Wait. Okay.
I've asked you what is smartness to you in our last podcast episode.
Intelligence.
Yeah. Now the question is, what is stupidity to you? And do you think it's an existential threat for humanity?
Oh, I think the existential threat to humanity is the fact that we exist. It's a pretty big existential threat. We have to exist now. Oh shit, we got to figure this out. Stupidity is akin to like the unwillingness or inability to update one's information about reality. It's like not only like ignorance isn't stupidity. Ignorance is just absence of knowledge, but it's like confident ignorance. It's like when you don't understand something, but you really think you do, and you're not willing to be corrected.
Or criticized.
Corrected or criticized or addressed in any way. Impulsivity.
It's hard to define stupidity, and it has such like a negative connotation, just like it's not helpful to just be like, you're stupid.
Yeah, no, it definitely isn't. I think that it's a matter of what's easiest. Like a matter of what's easiest and a matter of like those tendencies that once helped us in our initial tribal jungle circumstances that now hinder us are the things that we would be able to call stupidity, like tribalism, racism, gut instinct judgments, like just things that at one point were helpful and useful, but now are just like getting in the way. Like those are the base roots of the concept of stupidity. Like when you don't know anything about anything, but like you think you do, and you're not willing to reconsider the things that you like, because it would be useful in the past. It's like, okay, God loves me, and we're going to, and like the simplifications that you aren't willing to address. Like that's the nature of stupidity. It's like, I think that I'm right, I feel that I'm right, I want to be right, I am right, and I'm not going to consider that I'm not, and I'm going to get violent if you because like that's the nature of stupidity. It's like you don't understand that you don't understand, and like when you're stupid, you don't know it. When you're stupid, you don't know it. You can't know it. It's like when you're too stupid to know you're stupid.
So in that sense, it's like confusion and ignorance.
It's confusion and ignorance, but it's like a layer on top where the confusion and ignorance hides itself and defends itself and is unwilling to be addressed.
So
like it's not just confusion and ignorance. Confusion is innocent. Ignorance is innocent. They're both neutral concepts. Confusion is just like and ignorance is not knowing things, whereas confusion is like not knowing what to make of things so much. Those things are perfectly like innocent on their own. It's about like reactions to those states of like fear and anger and like frustration and unwillingness to be addressed or like to work through the conditions, but instead like living in rejection of them or living in like confidence in spite of them. Like I'm ignorant, I don't know anything about anything, but I'm confident that the bull spirit was in my dreams last night, and like it totally means that something great is going to happen next week. Like just things that
you can't convince me otherwise.
And you can't convince me otherwise. Like and this is the nature of stupidity in our tribal past. Like as I understand it, it's really hard to like to get at the roots of stupidity. But I think it's mostly about like the fact that thinking complex thoughts and taking into consideration the entirety of a situation is difficult and therefore less likely to be done. And the more likely thing to do is the easiest thing to do, and easy mode in terms of thought processing is usually very stupid.
Like denying climate change is
just not being willing to dive into it and to consider the alternate position. Like it's that wouldn't be like the best example so much as it would be like a higher order example of the lower order system.
All vaccines are bad.
Again, higher order. It's more like not trusting anything any scientist says. Like something more basal like that, where it's like
stupid position.
Yeah, it's like I'm not. Because it's like I don't understand a thing. I'm not willing to understand a thing. Therefore, bad. Like it's a simplification heuristic that would have helped at one point, but is now. Yeah, I don't really have too much more to say on that.
Okay. I think we're almost done. This is the last thing. I wanted to ask you about skepticism, but first I want to read a short tale I read the other day that Bertrand Russell recounted in his work titled Skeptical Essays.
Cool.
So it goes, a story is told of Pyrrho, the founder of Pyrrhonism, which was the old name for skepticism. He maintained that we never know enough to be sure that one course of action is wiser than another. In his youth, when he was taking his constitutional one afternoon, he saw his teacher in philosophy, from whom he had imbibed his principles, with his head stuck in a ditch, unable to get out. After contemplating him for some time, he walked on, maintaining that there was no sufficient ground for thinking he would do any good by pulling the old man out. Others, less skeptical, effected a rescue and blamed Pyro for his heartlessness. But his teacher, true to his principles, praised him for his consistency.
That's not a good story at all. That's dumb.
What are your thoughts?
I think that's very dumb. Like, you can apply the skepticism at any point in the story and it would change the outcome of the story and the attempted principle. It's like, what if he was skeptical in the other direction? Like, what if he was skeptical that, like, he was doing this on purpose, and instead, like, he was skeptical about that aspect of it, and instead concluded, oh shit, this guy's in danger, I should help him.
If you're completely skeptical about all,
it's dead
not
end.
knowing enough, never know enough to be sure that one course of action is wiser than another,
Indecisive.
then you would get to the point of just, like, not doing anything at all, like, not even walking by.
Paralytic indecisiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's...
I thought it was funny.
It's kind of like confidence mentioned in the other episode. How,
I literally wrote that down.
There you go. How it's a matter of, like, context. Like, what are we being skeptical about and why? Like, I can... Yeah, like, if you claim that we're out of water upstairs, like, or there's, like, something... It's like, oh, I've got to go verify. It's like... Yeah. But if you claim, like, our house is actually made out of umbrellas, I'd be like, what? What the hell? What? That's quite a claim. Like,
I'm very skeptical of that.
I guess the answer to skepticism is the Hitchens quote: "The extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence." So it's more along the lines of that. It's like, okay, what kind of claim are you making?
If I told you that I got a small pony and put it outside and it's outside right now, you'd probably be...
I can say, I don't believe you without having to...
Yeah, skepticism. Yeah, it does. It also reminds me of the last episode of when he said how being genuine is living by well-reasoned values, and this person seems to live by his principles, kind of, though we said it's, like, kind of inconsistent.
Yeah, I think it's a very inconsistent story.
But maybe they aren't very well-reasoned.
Could be.
It's also funny because we, like, fundamentally don't know whether doing or not doing an action might lead to something great or terrible to happen in the future.
But at one point you've got to act.
Yeah, our prediction window is really limited, and ambiguity and uncertainty grows the more variables there are and the further you look into the future.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of what the value of skepticism is and when it should be used, it's when you've sort of summed it up as, like...
it's when there's major inconsistencies in a framework.
Yeah, when something is, like, out of left field.
Or just out of place, just like in some sort of like major dissonance or major contradiction appears within a larger system that seems to be, like, consistent with itself. Yeah. And it's like, wait a second, that's when it stands out. What's going on there? Or like, on some level, like, you have to have like, just like when we were talking about truth, and there's no 100%. Like, there'll always be something that's just beyond the horizon of understanding. Like, you'll never have complete knowledge of something. That's like, and just like with as it is with truth, it is with certainty, where you can never be 100% certain about anything. There's always room for skepticism. There's always room for a little bit of skepticism in any assertion.
But we have to act.
Yeah, of course. But it's degrees of certainty. It's like, you've got to act in favor of the degrees, even though, like, it could be that the house is made of umbrellas, but when I need one, I'm not going to rely on it.
And it could be that leaving the professor in a ditch could lead to something good happening down
like,
the line.
Yeah, exactly.
Or it could lead to him dying. Like, what's more likely?
There you go. Exactly.
That's everything I have for today.
Oh, shit.
We did it!
Episode
2 complete!
Hell yeah, thanks for joining. I hope that you've got some insights.
I hope there was something of value here.